Aarushi Mehta and Nisha Rao, two Indian students chasing the American dream, had everything in common until one forbidden secret turned their friendship into a deadly rivalry that ended in blood on a New York apartment floor. Aarushi Mehta had spent her entire life in Mumbai's crowded lanes, surrounded by honking rickshaws, spicy street food, and the comfort of her close-knit family. When she received her acceptance letter from a prestigious university in New York City, it felt like destiny opening its doors. Her parents, though worried, were proud. She promised them she would stay focused, study hard, and make them proud. Landing in New York, however, was like stepping into another universe. The cold wind, the distant sirens, and the tall buildings towering over her made her feel both small and free. Everything seemed possible, and yet a part of her felt lost in the chaos. She found a shared apartment in Queens through a student housing group. The place was small but cozy, with one shared kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a view of the busy street below. Her new roommate, Nisha Rao, greeted her politely on the first day. Nisha was also from India, though she had already been in New York for a year. She was studying psychology and worked part-time at a cafe downtown. Her calm and composed nature was the complete opposite of Aarushi's restless energy. Over time, their differences blended into a comfortable friendship. Nisha often helped Aarushi navigate the city, showing her how to take the subway, where to buy groceries, and which neighborhoods were safe to walk in after dark. They cooked together on weekends, laughed over Bollywood movies, and shared long talks about missing home. Aarushi admired Nisha's discipline. Nisha, in return, envied Aarushi's carefree attitude. Their friendship grew naturally, rooted in shared struggles and dreams of a better life. Life felt balanced until Ethan Miller entered their world. He was Nisha's boyfriend, a tall, confident photography student from Boston University who often visited on weekends. His charm filled every room he walked into, and his passion for art made him seem magnetic. He had a way of talking that made people feel like they were the only one who mattered. Aarushi noticed the way he looked at things, like he was always searching for beauty in everything. At first, Aarushi viewed him simply as Nisha's boyfriend, but slowly his kindness drew her in. He helped her fix her camera lens when it broke, gave her advice about lighting for her class project, and sometimes stayed to chat even when Nisha wasn't around. There was something dangerous in the way his attention lingered. Aarushi felt both flattered and guilty. It started subtly, shared laughter, compliments, stolen glances. Nisha didn't notice at first. She trusted them both completely. She would often leave the two alone while she studied late or worked extra shifts. Aarushi told herself it was harmless. She didn't mean to blur boundaries, but the loneliness of living far from home made her crave connection. Ethan's presence filled that void. Every night, Aarushi would lie awake replaying their brief moments together. She knew it was wrong, but her heart ignored reason. Somewhere deep down, she sensed that this friendship would not stay innocent for long. What began as admiration was quietly turning into temptation. A spark that, once lit, would be impossible to control. The connection between Aarushi and Ethan deepened in ways neither of them planned, or at least that's what they told themselves. It began with study sessions that stretched late into the night, where they would sit close together on the living room floor, surrounded by open laptops and empty coffee mugs. Ethan helped her with her photography assignments, showing her how to capture emotions through light and perspective. Aarushi admired his skill and the way his mind worked. She felt seen in a way she never had before. Every time he praised her photos, her heart fluttered. She started dressing up when she knew he was coming, pretending it was just for fun, though she knew the truth. Ethan's relationship with Nisha had quietly begun to change. He still called her his girl, but his visits became less affectionate. The laughter they once shared was replaced with small silences and excuses about being tired or busy. Aarushi noticed those silences and filled them effortlessly. She would listen to him when he complained about school or his struggles with his art portfolio. He found comfort in her warmth and curiosity, things he claimed Nisha had lost in her obsession with academics. Slowly, he began staying longer after Nisha left for work, claiming he needed to help Aarushi finish her project. The secret moments between them grew in number and intensity. They shared food from the same plate, brushed hands accidentally, and locked eyes longer than they should have. One evening, as the city lights shimmered through the window, Ethan kissed her for the first time. It was quick, impulsive, and wrong, but neither of them pulled away. Aarushi's heart raced, torn between guilt and excitement. From that night onward, the boundary between right and wrong disappeared. They started meeting in quiet corners of the city, cafes in Brooklyn, empty art studios after dark, even the park near campus, where they would sit close enough for their hands to touch without anyone noticing. To the world, they were just friends, but in private, they were something much more dangerous. Aarushi lived for the thrill of those stolen moments. Yet every time she returned home and saw Nisha's trusting smile, a wave of guilt washed over her. She wanted to tell her to end it before it got worse, but she couldn't. The secret had become an addiction. As weeks passed, Nisha began to sense something odd. Ethan's behavior had shifted. He avoided her calls, canceled plans, and when he was with her, his eyes often wandered. Aarushi tried to act normal, but small details started to betray her. Nisha once found a lipstick stain on Ethan's hoodie, a shade she never wore. Another time, she noticed a perfume scent on his jacket that didn't belong to her. The small doubts began to build into a storm of suspicion. Meanwhile, Ethan's feelings grew more complicated. He told Aarushi he was confused, that he cared for her but didn't know how to end things with Nisha. He promised he would figure it out, and she believed him. Aarushi started dreaming about a future with him, a tiny apartment, shared breakfasts, and laughter without guilt. But love born from betrayal never stays peaceful for long. One careless mistake would soon tear everything apart. When Nisha stumbled upon a hidden envelope in Aarushi's drawer, a stack of printed photos of Ethan and Aarushi together, her world shattered in an instant. The quiet friendship that once felt like family had now turned into the deepest form of betrayal imaginable. Nisha stood in her room staring at the photos, her hands trembling. The faces smiling back at her felt unfamiliar, almost cruel. Aarushi and Ethan, laughing together, holding hands, their closeness captured in moments that were supposed to belong to her. For a long time, she couldn't move. The sound of her own heartbeat filled the room, loud and unbearable. Everything she had believed in the friendship she trusted, the relationship she built, crumbled in a matter of seconds. She didn't confront them immediately. Instead, she folded the photos neatly, hid them in her drawer, and waited. Over the next few days, Nisha's behavior changed subtly. She spoke less, smiled less, and watched more. Every small action between Aarushi and Ethan became a clue confirming her worst fears. She noticed the brief eye contact they tried to hide, the nervous laughter when she entered the room, and the tension that filled the apartment. Ethan's visits became shorter, his excuses longer. Aarushi grew quieter too, her cheerfulness replaced by an uneasy silence. The air inside the apartment grew heavy, as if both women were holding their breath, waiting for something to explode. When Nisha finally confronted Ethan, it was not with shouting or anger, but with cold precision. She met him at a cafe near campus, her voice steady as she asked if there was something he needed to tell her. At first, he denied it, but when she mentioned the photos, his expression gave him away. His silence confirmed what she already knew. He tried to explain, to claim it was a mistake, something meaningless that just happened, but Nisha could see through his words. She walked away that evening without another glance, feeling a strange emptiness instead of rage. When she returned home, Aarushi was in the kitchen preparing dinner. For a moment, Nisha just watched her, the girl who had once been her closest friend. She wanted to scream, to demand why, but no words came out. Instead, she told Aarushi in a calm voice that she needed to move out by the end of the month. Aarushi froze, realizing instantly that the truth was out. She tried to apologize, but Nisha walked away, shutting her door firmly. From that day, silence became their only form of communication. Days passed like slow poison. The apartment, once filled with laughter and music, turned into a place of tension and resentment. They avoided each other, cooking at different times, sleeping with their doors locked. Aarushi began to regret everything, but guilt turned into fear. She knew Nisha's quietness wasn't forgiveness. It was fury waiting to surface. Neighbors began to notice the change. Late at night, muffled arguments would echo through the thin walls. Sometimes there were sounds of things breaking, other times just long stretches of crying. Yet every morning they both left for their classes pretending everything was normal, but the pretense couldn't last forever. One evening, Aarushi found Nisha packing some of her belongings. The sight made her panic. She begged for a chance to explain, to fix things somehow. Nisha didn't respond. That night, both women barely slept. The apartment was soaked in tension, a fragile silence that felt ready to break. Neither of them knew it yet, but the next time that silence shattered, it would end in blood. The night it happened was cold and wet, with rain hitting the apartment windows like impatient fingers. The city outside was alive with the usual hum of traffic and distant sirens, but inside that small Queen's apartment, a storm of another kind was brewing. Aarushi had returned early from campus, hoping to pack a few things quietly. She had decided she would move out the next morning, unable to bear the weight of Nisha's silent hatred any longer. Her suitcase lay open on the bed, half filled with clothes, her hands trembling as she folded them. Nisha came home later than usual, soaked from the rain and visibly exhausted. She placed her umbrella near the door and saw the suitcase immediately. For a moment, she just stared at it, her jaw tightening. The realization that Aarushi was leaving before the month ended, escaping, perhaps, felt like another betrayal. The room filled with a tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Aarushi avoided eye contact, pretending to be busy. But Nisha's silence was louder than any scream. Words finally broke through. They were sharp, bitter, and unfiltered. Accusations spilled from both sides. Nisha furious about betrayal, Aarushi desperate to justify her actions. The argument grew louder, echoing through the walls. Years of frustration, guilt, and humiliation erupted in that tiny space. Nisha accused her of destroying everything she had built. Aarushi shouted back that she never meant to hurt anyone. The shouting escalated until the words no longer made sense. Just noise filled with pain. In the kitchen, something shattered. A plate, then a glass. Nisha lunged forward, and in the chaos, the fight turned physical. They struggled, pushing and grabbing at each other, their anger feeding off their fear. Aarushi stumbled toward the counter, her hand brushing against a knife. In a moment of blind panic, she turned and swung it. The motion was instinctive, driven by terror rather than thought. The blade struck Nisha's chest. For a second, everything went silent. Nisha froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. The knife slipped from Aarushi's hand, clattering onto the floor. Nisha tried to speak, but only a small gasp escaped. She staggered backward, collapsing near the couch, her white blouse blooming red. Aarushi dropped to her knees, shaking, whispering apologies that dissolved into sobs. She pressed her hands to the wound, but it was useless. The room filled with the metallic smell of blood and rain seeping through the open window. When Aarushi realized what she had done, panic took over. She backed away from the body, crying uncontrollably, her mind spinning in confusion. Her first instinct was to call someone, anyone, but fear of going to prison paralyzed her. Instead, she grabbed her passport, her wallet, and her phone, stuffing them into her bag. She left the knife where it fell. 15 minutes later, she walked out of the apartment building, drenched by the rain but numb to the cold. A neighbor saw her leaving, looking pale and disoriented, but assumed it was another late night errand. When the police arrived after a neighbor reported a scream, they found the door unlocked. The living room was in chaos, overturned furniture, broken glass, blood on the floor. Nisha's body lay motionless, her lifeless eyes staring toward the window. The murder weapon was beside her. The police knew immediately it had been personal. There was no forced entry, no sign of theft, only rage and betrayal. As officers searched the apartment, they found the half-packed suitcase and Aarushi's missing belongings. This story of a friendship gone wrong was becoming painfully clear, and somewhere in the dark city, a frightened killer was already running out of places to hide. The citywide search for Aarushi Mehta began before sunrise. Her photo circulated across news outlets and social media, painting her as the prime suspect in a brutal crime of passion. Detectives retraced her steps, visiting the university, nearby subway stations, and the apartment complex where she had lived. They found no trace of her except a few camera clips showing her leaving the building with a backpack and umbrella. Her face looked hollow, her eyes empty. The rain washed away any footprints that might have led investigators to her. For 3 days, New York buzzed with whispers about the case. News anchors debated the psychology behind her actions, classmates shared photos of her with disbelief, and people online tried to piece together what could have driven a young woman with such promise to kill her closest friend. Ethan Miller, meanwhile, was summoned for questioning. When he arrived at the station, his hands shook uncontrollably. The moment the detectives showed him a photo of the bloodied living room, he broke down. Between sobs, he admitted to the affair, explaining how it started and how it spiraled out of control. He claimed Aarushi had called him the night of the murder, her voice trembling as she said she had done something terrible and didn't know what to do. Detectives used her call records and ATM activity to trace her movements. Late on the 3rd night, an officer spotted her near an abandoned subway tunnel in Brooklyn. When they approached, she didn't resist. Her clothes were soaked, her hair tangled, and her face streaked with tears and grime. She had been hiding without food or rest, too frightened to surrender, but too broken to keep running. At the precinct, the questioning lasted for hours. Aarushi's voice was soft, almost detached, as she described what happened. She insisted it hadn't been planned, that she never meant to kill Nisha. According to her, the fight had turned violent when Nisha came at her with a glass bottle, and in panic, she reached for the knife. She claimed it was self-defense, but investigators noticed the contradictions. The blood patterns showed multiple stab wounds, not one. The forensic report indicated that Nisha had been struck after she was already on the ground. The evidence told a different story, one of rage, not fear. During the trial, Aarushi sat motionless, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The courtroom was silent as the prosecution presented photos, text messages, and the recorded confession. Ethan testified against her, his voice shaking, saying he had never imagined things would end this way. He admitted his guilt in betraying Nisha, but said Aarushi's obsession had turned dangerous. The defense tried to argue emotional instability and provocation, but the jury saw the act for what it was, an intentional killing born from jealousy. Aarushi was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. As the verdict was read, she showed no reaction, only a blank stare at the floor. Ethan left the courtroom without looking back. Within months, he moved out of New York, deleted his social media, and disappeared from public view. In prison, Aarushi reportedly kept to herself, spending hours writing in a journal and avoiding other inmates. Those who spoke to her said she often murmured Nisha's name, as if still trying to explain something to the friend she destroyed. Tragedy lingered long after the case was closed, a haunting reminder of how love, when twisted by guilt and desire, can become the darkest form of possession. 3 lives that had once intertwined in friendship and ambition were shattered forever. One ended in death, one trapped in a cage, and one condemned to live with the unbearable weight of memory.